So as we look at exercise specifically, we've certainly learned a lot since that time about the benefits of exercise for people with MS. Tell us a little bit about that.
What we do know now, based on research as well as just time and interaction with patients, is that people with MS can gain the same benefits as those without MS. So they can improve in areas of flexibility and strength and endurance, as well as quality of life. What we have found through some of the research is that perhaps the baseline is a little bit lower for people with MS. So in other words, if we compare people with MS and those without MS, they might have slightly less strength and they might have slightly less endurance as measured by some of the parameters that we use to measure those areas. However, they can gain in the same fashion that those who don't have MS can gain. So that's an important component. People can participate in exercise and they can gain the benefits of exercise.
I think that's very encouraging for people, certainly. As you look at how people approach that, are there certain considerations they need to be mindful of?
I think that there are some very unique situations as it relates to MS that people need to be mindful of. One is that they may be starting at a lower level in terms of that baseline which we just talked about. So they may need to make some specific modifications, particularly if they've exercised in the past. They may need to look at ways in which they make specific modifications in order to be able to participate fully in the activity. So it may be modifications to equipment, because if they have balance problems, maybe they need, if they're riding a bicycle, maybe they need a wider base. If it's something as it relates to endurance, they may need to break up that activity in a shorter fashion, in an interval type of fashion. So they may need to make modifications to the program, the equipment, or the like. What we hear a lot about also is heat sensitivity for people with MS. So they may need to look at making modifications to the time of day in which they do the particular activity. They may need to use certain types of cooling agents. They may need to look at fans and air conditioning and those kinds of things. So there are modifications that need to be made in some cases, and those are some of the things that people with MS need to be mindful of.
Do you think there are any types of physical activity that people need to stay away from or need to be wary about?
Well, I think because of the heat sensitivity types of activities, it's important to perhaps modify your activities. Things like Bikram yoga are generally not recommended types of activities. I think utilizing the resources that people have, whether it be a physical therapist, your physician, other individuals who can be helpful in identifying some of the different symptoms you may have, is very important, because then you can identify how you may need to make those modifications to those activities and which activities may work best for you. So it may be important to look at how, if you have a balance problem, either modifying the equipment on the bicycle or doing more of a stationary bicycle. But you can still gain those benefits of exercise.
And as we look at yoga, yoga can be beneficial, but you're referring to a type of yoga that might use heat.
Correct.
And be in a heated room.
Right.
Or power yoga, that's another one I can imagine that might be contraindicated for people with MS.
Right. And I think we look at the same thing as it relates to water temperature with swimming and those kinds of activities. So picking out the location in which you do your particular activities is an important decision in that whole process. If there's a lot of activities that go on for people in warm water, that may not necessarily be the good pool for you. You may need to look at something that's a little bit cooler. Interestingly, what we see with people with MS is sometimes they have problems with cold temperatures too. So knowing your body and knowing how you respond to different types of environments is going to be an extremely important component also. Some people report increased stiffness with their cold temperatures.
Thanks, Brian.